Good evening to all present. I hope I am audible to everyone.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. A very good evening to everyone, and we thank you for joining today's webinar. Time is a very precious, limited resource for all professionals today, and therefore we appreciate you committing your valuable time for this knowledge sharing session. In return for your valuable time, we hope that you will leave this webinar with newfound perspectives and a more comprehensive grasp of how these massive geopolitical events, which may make, break, and shake the headlines, have various impacts on energy agreements and the international energy market as a whole. We are all stakeholders of this complex energy ecosystem in one way or another, and it is useful to possess a multifaceted understanding of how these global shifts are affecting us in nuanced ways. So, a warm welcome to everyone. My name is Vinayak, and I look after training, consultancy, and new initiatives at IESD, and it is my privilege to compare the program today. I would like to introduce our respected speakers and moderate the session. And also, at the end, we may take questions from the audience. Whereas the discussion as a whole in today's webinar will be structured in a conversational question and answer moderator speaker format between two professionals who are veterans of their field with perspectives from energy, global economics and geopolitics, contracts, and law. Today's webinar has been organized by India Energy Skill Development Private Limited, or IESD for short. IESD is a cutting edge, award winning organization focused on future oriented training, skill development, and deployability in the energy sector. More about IESD can be seen on the screen. You are very welcome to visit our website and our LinkedIn to know more about IESD. And I urge you to connect with us after the webinar as well. If I give a brief overview, IESD looks at future oriented areas in the energy industry, whether it be carbon capture, green hydrogen, blue hydrogen, electric vehicle technologies, biofuels. We believe that the energy professionals and students of today need to be well versed and have industry ready deployable skills to be true ready energy professionals for the next 5 to 10 years. I would now like to take the opportunity to introduce our speakers for today's webinar. Our moderator for today is Ms. Suniti Kaur. Welcome, Suniti ji. Ms. Suniti Kaur is a leading legal expert in the energy sector with extensive practice experience in oil and gas, renewable energy, green hydrogen, commercial contracts, arbitration, and energy dispute resolution since 1996. So, Suniti ji is the go to person for anything and everything to do with contracts, energy agreements, arbitration, and renewables and green energy. And we look forward to helping ma'am helping us to understand the energy ecosystem of today. Suniti ma'am has also founded Alaya Legal, which is a boutique law firm based in NCR. Alaya Legal was founded in 2003 by Divjot Singh and Suniti Kaur. Energy and sustainability is one of the firm's dedicated practice areas, which covers oil and gas, renewable energy, and green hydrogen, with the Alaya legal team drafting and negotiating energy agreements across the value chain. They also represent clients in arbitration and litigation arising from energy disputes, giving them a well rounded view of how this sector works on paper and in practice. So, if we have any professionals today from any sphere within the energy industry who have found themselves at one or another end of energy agreements, conflicts, disputes, or terms, Alaya Legal is the go to entity which can help you and make sense of any such situations. I would like to now introduce our speaker for today, Mr. Sanjay Kaul. Mr. Sanjay Kaul is an energy professional with a very well rounded experience of more than 3 decades, having seen various facets of this industry, whether it be from the consultancy side of the Big Four, PwC, and Deloitte's India Energy practices, from the higher education and skill development, manpower, and people power side of things, having founded the University of Petroleum and Energy Studies in Dehradun, and from the asset management and on ground scenario side of various national cross-country oil and gas asset management from his time with Sunmark Projects and Sunmark Group of Companies. Mr. Sanjay Kaul is a practicing advisor and leader for more than 3.5 decades. He is a subject matter expert in sustainability, spanning the topics of energy transition, ESG, net zero, and future fuels, and the sectors of energy, which are oil and gas, power, and renewables, namely, and infrastructure, and from the higher education and learning management side as well. Mr. Sanjay Kaul is a fellow of the Energy Institute UK. So it is my privilege to welcome and introduce our two speakers for today. And I would now like to hand over to Ms. Suniti Kaur for setting the context of today's discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, IESD, for hosting today's session. I would like to make the most of our time with Mr. Kaul today and cover the topic as meaningfully as possible within the hour. Heading straight to the context. The context is rather simple. Actually, it's rather straightforward here. We have contracts which are already signed and running, and we have contracts that are being negotiated or are yet to be signed and are in the making. The question that we really wish to explore today is whether the energy crisis and conflicts of our times require us to do something differently with respect to contracts that we are about to enter and those which we have already executed. So I'd like to make a request to Mr. Kaul here. I'd like him to walk us through this from ground up, defining the concepts and giving us the context and helping our participants understand what this really means in practice. So I think let's begin. And the start point is a good place to begin. So I think I'd like to begin with the very basics, Mr. Kaul. So what exactly do you mean by energy and what qualifies as an energy agreement? Over to you, Mr. Kaul.
Thank you, Suniti. Good energetic start. Since energy systems outlive most of the energy infrastructure and the world moves on energy, I think it's a very topical thing to do a webinar like this. And I'm really impressed that you started with the concept of energy first, because agreements are agreements, contracts are contracts. And sometimes we forget that the agreement is to deliver something. And it is meant to provide stability, tranquility, and a dispute resolution. So if you do not understand what is the intent of the contract, then you will end up in the terms and contracts, the terms and conditions, and so many other things of how the contract will not work rather than how it will work. So good that we understand that energy is fundamental. It is only next to food security, energy security, and it's at the base of everything. So it is good that we first understand what energy really means so that we can then understand how do we bring in tranquility and delivery in energy contracts and agreements. Well, energy is very simple. Like everything else, it is a charge per unit. Whether it is per barrel, per kilowatt, per this, per that, or per drawing, per man hour, per man month, per kilometer, per nautical mile, shipping charge, per tonnage. Its energy is a unit, a commodity, a charge which can be charged per unit, or a service. There are only two kinds of contracts in energy agreements. So there is a service contract where you take services, and there is a supply contract where either you are buying a commodity like oil and gas or coal or thermal power or nuclear power, renewable power, solar power, wind energy, pump up hydrogen, fuel cells, anything, I mean, which provides energy. And then there is a service side of it, EPC, O&M, consulting, insurance services, banking, host of things where you're taking services, project management services. So if one adheres to the uniqueness of an energy trade or a energy system is the value chain which guides it. It's like the from the wellhead to gas burner tip, whatever happens, or from the solar conversion of thermal energy into electrical energy to the meter at a home or a factory which gets it used. And that's where the concepts of these circular economies and systems are also emerging. So if I say that energy is a combination of energy systems, or a resultant value chain, or energy markets, the energy economics of it. Energy economics is pretty bewildering. I think people only think diamonds have that capability, but later maybe in the show I can demonstrate that it is probably energy is the only commodity which can go 10,000, 100,000, a million times within a very short cycle. I mean, it's quite dazzling. Some of the states, the entire economics is dependent on the tariff they collect on energy. So, and of course, the energy geopolitics. I mean, there is geopolitics and there is energy geopolitics, which is actually getting weaponized right now, and that's why it is getting bothered. So when we say energy and when we say agreements, two things become very, very important. One is that we need to remember always that understanding energy and its pillars, which I just described, is very essential to have energy agreements. If you are doing a 1,30,000 crore refinery, which will get built over 7 years and may take 11 years, or has to be built because today political tenures determine the project life cycles. You need to understand what it will require and why a continued performance or a thing is so important. So repeatedly, I am saying when you say energy and when you say energy agreement, understanding how energy services and supply works is also very important. And energy industry's uniqueness. Every industry has uniqueness. Shipping has its own uniqueness. Even a commodity like cement has its own uniqueness. But policy incentives, trade deals, tariffs around energy, regulators, standards around energy, or geopolitical factors, choke points, this, that, the other, whether you're a buyer or a seller, what's your economic standing? Are you a 90% import dependent nation and you're trying to put a robotics and a battery factory? Then, knowing what your economic standing is very important. And suddenly when your imports get held up because somebody doesn't want to. So energy trade is another issue. 87% of the entire energy world trade is coal or oil. I mean, if we don't understand that, then if you are having any supply agreement, it would be very difficult. Currencies, jurisdiction, auxiliary industry around it, your counterparty is West, which believes in sanction, your supply is coming from East, which is under sanction. How would your insurance work? So, understanding both energy industry, its pillars, and the intent of the agreement is to have that agreement deliver. These 2 points really define the energy industry, the uniqueness and its links to energy agreements.
Right.
I think it was a little long, but I just wanted to emphasize that understanding energy and industry was a little more important before we get into the agreement side.
Perfect. Thank you for the emphasis. And I like that you did talk about food security and energy security. And if I may say, they are interlinked. And there could be no food security without energy security. And yes, you're right that it stands at the head, if I may put it like that. And the rest, all the contracts in various other sectors just follow. So, and the other thing you mentioned at the start was about the intent of contract. And it would be very interesting to see how this intent is preserved in the times of crisis. So today we are meeting during a very active Hormuz crisis. As we all know, the developments are, I think, happening faster than we can keep pace with. It's a war that has already shifted the LNG market from anticipated surplus to acute shortage, and all this within, I would say, several weeks. And India is still simultaneously buying discounted Russian crude and under the tightening sanction pressure. But before we get into the contracts, I would like to understand from you as to which part of this is actually the most disruptive to energy agreements right now. Is it the physical supply stock, that is the energy security aspect? Is it the sanctions architecture, or is it something else?
Well, you talked of Hormuz, which is very important because Hormuz is really very important for us. Our 55 to 65% of LNG comes from there. And more seriously, 90% of our LPG passed from there. So we really saw, LPGs getting used at homes, etc. A sort of a crisis where, I suddenly also started remembering the pandemic period where there was the start of the panic period of people looking for cylinders, and suddenly the menus getting shrunk in Indian restaurants, or even some of them raising prices disproportionately. So it had an immediate fallout. So when we thought this Hormuz is somewhere and it will not happen, and then suddenly your tikki wala at chapati has suddenly doubled its prices. So you suddenly say, what's happening across this sea, Arabian Sea I'm standing? So you have got a good question, very good question. Though you've talked about LNG and its sudden change from surplus to, but the impact is far wider. It's just that it will take many circles to settle. Hormuz is one of the choke points which got weaponized. Suez, Panama, Malacca, Bab el Mandab. I mean, if Bab el Mandab is choked up, the whole Suez goes. So, and Suez is the only way to Europe. So, and of course, Malacca Strait is many times more useful for us for non-oil and gas also, with the majority of our this thing. And the combination is even more deadly. Suppose if you just combine Bab el Mandab and Suez, or pair it Suez and Malacca, suddenly we are seeing a $150, $200 price and 2-3% jump in a country like India's GDP in inflation. So these are very real threats, but without getting into the extent, or I will limit my answer to your concept that how these changes actually affect the agreements. In fact, we need to get back to the concept of an agreement, the tranquility and intent. Intent is to actually have gas. Intent is to actually let the ships float, come, meet the market for that commodity or that service. And we need to see where we are in this. I mean, where we are is, I'm assuming all the participants are from India. We already have chosen gas as our transition fuel. We want it to go up from 6% to 15%. And we're trying that for last maybe 2 decades. And our just demand keeps going up. So any supply shock, in a way, is like fever. Fever is not the disease. It is actually a body's protection mechanism to tell you that something is wrong and your body is fighting it. So I can only see the positive side of it, that this can actually happen. These kind of choke points could affect us pretty badly, and whatever economics, whatever force majeure, first ever condition precedents, whatever long term versus spot we had done in this, whatever energy system we sort of built for it. We invested in a lot of LNG storage on our west coast. In the past 2 decades, and those storage actually supply a lot of almost 50% of our gas requirement of the country. So suddenly that vulnerability has been exposed, and no wonder our emphasis on CBG, our emphasis on strategic reserves, even for gas, our emphasis on how this 50% will be met. In fact, so much so that geopolitics works in reverse also. Today, we know that if TAPI would have happened, the Turkmenistan, Afghanistan, Pakistan, India pipeline, it would have served 18 to 22% of India's gas needs. Imagine that kind of amount which a cross-country pipeline or rather can bring. But how would one manage that geopolitics? But perhaps in this world, a Oman-India pipeline or a TAPI pipeline looks more compelling today than it looked before. I'm not saying it looks possible more. I'm saying it must look compelling. So I think with these periodic shocks, it also tests the, because a contract is not supposed to be, a hard flooring. It is supposed to be a safety net. Where even if you fall, your fall is broken in very gently. So I'm sure that we had the security of 50% of our supply relying on 25-year agreements, and now having to buy from spot, and there is no compensation of whatever that costs, and it's force majeure, should make all the parties think that is what more needs to get done. So I'm not answering your question completely. I'm just setting a context that the short answer to your question is that the structure of the agreements, even the national concepts around which the sovereign supports are provided to these agreements, because now your energy security is threatened. The geopolitical alignments, we have seen a lot of action, including leaders now covering south up to New Zealand here, and it's like the Malacca Strait is getting followed. Suddenly we see BRICS activity. We suddenly see UK and European Union contracts getting signed very quickly. So you see that what Hormuz is doing on the positive side also, that a lot of geopolitical realignment is happening because this realignment would give rise not only to newer structures of agreements, newer definitions and newer solutions to force majeure and other such situations, alternate sourcing of energy, diversifying your risk, a lot of. So supply shocks are shocks. Short term, a lot of loss can happen. That actual loss is 30,000 crores per month of controlled prices. 4 months, it could be $12 billion. But I think India was wise to not lower its prices over a very long period of time when it was low. So it had the money to bear that shock. So a lot of it got challenged, and I think a lot will come out of it.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Kaul, for this. I am tempted to do mention that yes, you talked about the crisis forcing us to look at other things, and you are not saying TAPI is the solution, but a compelling direction to look at. Without getting more into it, because I think right now it would be okay to say that TAPI is probably just TA as of now, but we will get to that later. And before we also discuss more on the choke points, because you did mention interestingly about the positive side of choke points. And but before we get to that and understand how we deal with it, I think I just like to get back to the nature of energy contracts, which is what you alluded to earlier. Now, in most industries, the contract records is a decision which is already made, and the commercial intent is put together into a contract, right? But in energy, what happens is that the document enables the decision in the first place, because if there is no PPA, there is no offtake, you don't have a power plant. And if there is no production sharing contract, you don't have a exploration or development in relation to an oil and gas field. And if you don't have a long-term offtake agreement, there is no question of an LNG terminal, right? None of it is viable, bankable at all. The projects wouldn't happen. So the contract here is not recordable. I mean, not just about the paperwork here. It is the very condition for the project to be existing. Now, with that in mind, I would like to understand from you as to what really sets the energy contracts apart from the contracts in other sectors or primary business inputs like capital, land, and manpower. Over to you.
Quite a very insightful question, I would say, that we always pay attention to capital, land, and manpower as something which is very fundamental to a project or to an investment. But in energy, there are certain unique features. I'm not saying that any energy agreement is entirely different from any other agreement, but it has certain interesting aspects for which a deep understanding of the energy industry, as I said, various factors, the value chain, the systems, needs to be there. Look at the most extremely risky area of, let's say, because oil and gas is a very major dynamic factor, billions of dollars of trade happening every day. The most extremely risky side of oil is exploration. I mean, you may end up spending $1 billion and find water after drilling 20 wells and each well costing millions of dollars. And for that, you need to negotiate for 5 years, 7 years with a regime in a sovereign country. And if you are lucky, getting a production sharing contract or a revenue sharing contract or whatever that regime offers. India currently offers a revenue sharing contract. You are bound then to look for it, maybe find nothing, or when you find it, monetize it over 25 years. So essentially, that is the magnitude of. I mean, I was an unmarried young man when we negotiated about RJON-1 in Badmer, Rajasthan, and got it for Shell. So you can imagine that now, it's still, now it has come to fruition over several. So it's quite unique in every way. Somebody may call, a power purchase agreement. Imagine the most politically sensitive thing sitting, whether it's a gas cylinder or a unit cost in a state. So there is often there is a joke of saying that power purchase agreement are signed by those governments which do not have the purchasing power. So one need to understand about the uniqueness and very, very high technology things being used in the energy sector. Not that every other sector is also using, but the entire value chain has a huge cascading effect. So any agreement, when you sign, the back end, front end, the cascading effect is just too much. I mean, I spoke to you about in the very first question, a 5 cents crude oil, 100 ml crude oil can be rotated that many times in few months to convert itself into a $7,000 synthetic heart valve. That's the level of multiplication. And if 5 cents becomes 7, and it has gone over 10,000 times or 100,000 times or a million times, you can imagine that what those 2 cents will become in the end. So the cascading effect of these agreements, that where you stand, are you an importer, are you providing services, are you doing what, in which part of this value chain do you stand, and what is the kind of agreement you are doing, does not absolve you that I am a small player, I only supply gas turbines under these conditions to a company, does not absolve you from the risk associated in the entire value chain or the liabilities in it. So your question is very insightful. I'm trying to contain the answer within that question, but the idea is that the cascading effect of the entire value chain rests in every 5 cents agreement in this. So people must understand that. One thing, I mean, you could be a tanker operator, lorry operator of transporting things, or could be a transmission line agreement, or could be a solar manufacturing. I mean, you see what has happened in renewable. I mean, the kind of change of ROIs and import, etc. So understanding the industry, making the risk assessment is very important. And the other than the cascading effect, the other unique feature is energy is the first one to take the hit. Any volatility, any impact anywhere. But the problem with the energy is that it straight away hits currencies, it hits stock markets, it hits shareholders' confidence, it hits manufacturing, it hits transportation, it hits just everybody else. So it's the first one to react to any crisis. You saw how quickly something on the other side of Arabian Sea affected a normal Belpuri tikki wala on chapati. That's the power energy agreement carries today in terms of. So cascading effect, the very first one to get affected. The only perhaps industry other than space or semiconductor or other industries where hot lines, hot handles, and hot handshakes are a must from day one. I mean, I don't know how many lawyers are there in this call or how many professionals, whether they understand these terms. This is an industry where you have to constantly be ready to negotiate, constantly be ready to raise a dispute, handle it. It's not something, and hotlines have to be maintained. It's not like if something is wrong, the lawyers will get called, they get to assess, they will write, they will raise. No. If you are at the front end, you are the person who's going to raise a call, who's going to raise a dispute, who's going to do everything, and it has to be hotlines with the client, or both parties have to maintain a hotline. It's not something lawyers versus the other guy's lawyers. The other thing is the hot handshakes. Every challenge we have seen in the last 2 years, Ukraine-India war, Ukraine-Russia war, this choke points, this thing, even Operation Sindoor has happened. So many conflicts have come and gone. It has created a lot of opportunities. Today, India's defense sector is looking up like anything, the kind of opportunities it offers. So, similarly, energy being the first one to get affected and having the cascading effect also creates a huge number of opportunities. You wouldn't find a single demotivated company, energy company in Middle East. They are all ramping up, and for the rebuild damage in Qatar and everything, and their prices in emerging markets in India are now gone up 3 times because they want to redirect the resources to Middle East and other areas to rebuild, and oil is back in the sense that they thought that not much capex will go. A huge capex is now getting redirected to energy sector, and also alternatives, whether it is BESS, battery storage, hydrogen, nuclear, everything is now in the front end. So I don't know. I have answered the capital, land, and manpower thing accurately for you, but the hotlines and hot handle and the hot handshakes is a capacity which the professionals need to build on either side of the agreement. At the same time, in reverse, if you really see, these agreements also provide a huge amount of stability. I mean, they are very advanced agreements in energy. They have got a scope of almost everything thought out. I mean, if not already, and that is percolating down and getting more refined because of the challenges. So you see that it is not a mayhem in terms of any long-term project or anything getting derailed because of that. Even the oil prices, I mean, $80 to 126, again back to 80, 85. So Asian premium, nobody thinks about it anymore. OPEX is all breaking up. So, it is really getting tested, and besides capital, land, and manpower, this is actually landed properly now because of this flashpoint.
Thank you. You've just warmed up the participants and all of us, in fact, close to the crisis and how it is going to impact us. But before we go there, so you have identified that yes, the elements which make this energy contracts unique, we have the risk. They are high risk, and they have cascading impact. And of course, they have to operate in a very dynamic market. We all know what happened to our prices for solar from rupee 9 to just under 3 in a matter of some years. And we are aware of what it's doing to the market. And to add to this, we have geopolitics and the crisis. So coming back to the core of what we wish to discuss today. So the crisis. The force majeure clause would excuse a party when there is something which is beyond its control, and when the performance becomes impossible. It sounds to me pretty straightforward. I'm sure no lawyer would agree with that, but yes, it does sound straightforward. When something is beyond your control, well, it's force majeure because you can't perform. Uh, but see, the interesting thing here is the Hormuz crisis did not per se stops the ships because of the missiles. What really happened was the insurers withdrew the cover, right? And the Houthis attacks do not find a proper fit. It doesn't fall within the definition of a proper war or a conflict between the two states. But yet, it did create a challenge, it did create a crisis. So the force majeure clause is something that everybody reaches out for, and we believe it would have the answers to just about everything. So the question to you here is, how well does the force majeure clause actually hold up? And how does the market volatility, in fact, I see many questions on the chat relating to this. How does this market trigger the force majeure clause in a contract management? And how have they, in the recent geopolitical developments, affected these contracts at a grassroots level?
Thanks, Suniti. I think there has been a lot of focus on force majeure. The last time I saw that focus was during COVID around the world, because pandemic was not in any insurance, any mitigation, any contract as a force majeure. And for the first time, people are now realizing that the biggest challenge to any infrastructure or commodity in the world, any expensive infrastructure or commodity in the world, is not weather, not war, but simply a drone. And it may not be owned by anyone, in the sense that it may even escape the definition of act of war, because, for example, Houthis are categorized as insurgents and not a state. So how do you the focus is there, but I would humbly request or appeal to all our energy negotiators to remember that a agreement or a contract is not designed around or intended to serve a force majeure. It is intended for the service or a supply of an item to be delivered. It must facilitate. So a force majeure is a mechanism which, when triggers, has to act on its own during a limited situation. It can be compared that a ship is designed to sail in choppy waters, and it is not designed for dry dock conveniences, for repairs or for whatever. I'm not saying it is not important. I'm not saying that the highlight and glamour it is getting because of this crisis, it is unjustified, and it is not. I'm also not saying it's not important. I'm just reminding ourselves that it's a go-to clause. It's like a hospital in our lives, very critical, very everything. But our life is not meant to be in hospitals, right? So why I'm making this is that I have seen a significant amount of time breaking heads on such clauses in an energy agreement, which is rightful, but disproportionate time being given to the functional aspects of the agreements, which is not good for energy industry, is my opinion. I think continue payment clauses, making it modular, is more important, or rapid dispute mechanisms are more important than the force majeure. But force majeure importance, which is now getting highlighted, is to be noted very carefully, because it is also justifying the old sayings which old lawyers has, that act of God and war, it's a little light-hearted fun which is told to the newcomers. The act of God and war, and expect it to be SAR. I mean, war and SAR don't rhyme, but that's how it is said. That if you leave this clause to only act of God and war, you expect that when it actually happens, it will go SAR, because you didn't define it correctly. So once we see that a state like US, which is continuously in war, very high tech, very everything, can do a wrong risk assessment of its approach towards Iran, it makes you think that whether your assessment to your agreement, your risk assessment to your agreement is right. Has it been well thought? Have you taken everything into account? Because The force majeure is when both parties agree that there are things which they have identified and they are beyond their control. It could be beyond their control. But if they don't think right, then there will always be disputes. So I think the first thing which the force majeure is making you do is re-evaluate how do you do your risk assessment. Is your risk assessment right? It has to be a qualitative exercise. It can't be a clerical exercise. In this case, what is also getting exposed is that it is the ability of both parties which matter. Not one party is doing it better than the other. If the other party is done it wrong, then that will happen. That 70% time in discussing negative clauses and 30% time getting in positive delivery clauses. So I think they should first collaborate on this and understand that. The other thing is, defining is not coverage. You may define that this may happen, that may happen in control, but that doesn't mean it will cover it. Risk is risk. Some risk can be covered, some risk cannot be covered. You could have mitigation risks for that, like in good times, save for bad times, provide alternative things, make your contracts more modular that you can, shift this year and let the original thing continue, etc. But mitigation challenge also have to be thought through when you have done the defining. If you've done the defining well, don't stop there. Make sure that don't consider it that it's coverage, because if you keep on stacking up the basket of force majeure and do not think of creative ways of mitigating it, then you're just making the contract more difficult. Luckily, what's positive is a very long and definitive list of force majeure is already available because of the 100 and 200 history of contracts in the world. You could have every possible, even, I don't know how we missed epidemics because we had forgotten about them for the last 50 years because of antibiotics and so many things. Even rodents were part of, rodents infestation, major infestation used to be at some time written in force. So definition is very important, but, in this long list, I mean, if you pick something up, don't just write epidemic, add government action also, because various governments acted differently in this. Some even provided compensation, and some simply closed down and did nothing. So make sure that when we pick up this ready-made list, the definition does not suffer. The other thing is, which I again say, is that lack of performance cannot hide behind force majeure. If a force majeure has happened, very good things, your mitigation will cover it, your definition is cover it. In hundreds of COVID cases, claims of force majeure, there were a significant number of cases that even without COVID, that performance would not have happened. So, and the principal could prove that, because of your performance till one day before the COVID, or what you could have done without that. So, my thing is that don't stack up the force majeure too high, define it well, and of course, make sure that there are redressal mechanisms, as many as possible, so it can be out of the, there could be, and be very careful of special situations. If there is a delivery clause, delivery of gas or whatever, or transmission, and you don't have sabotage with it, or you don't have rupture there as definition. So make sure that special positions are provided onto those things. There are regions where there's never been a hailstorm in last 25 years. But then there is a hailstorm with, almost the size of marbles, falling on the solar panels and cracking them and, ruining the entire power delivery. I mean, but it was not qualified as force majeure because it was not defined. At the same time, a wind energy company defining extreme weather as one of the delivery challenge got waived $500 million delivery failure. It got approved as a force majeure that there was extreme weather and because it was defined well. So your wind business, your solar business, your energy business, unstable, untested technology, like in fuel cells or in hydrogen. It can be well defined that there are things which nobody else has done ever. In EV, we are still, upgrading what was there yesterday. So it is good that the force majeure, who thought that engineers would be withdrawn and entire robotic production systems would not be getting exported suddenly because of government action. And here somebody has applied for a PLI benefit and made commitments to actually supply BES power. So, I'm sorry I'm taking longer time because this has been the hero of the game in the last 4 to 5 months. So I need to really the positive side, the force majeure is creating a wave, a chain reaction. I was happy to see that there is a US company who's raising money for India SMRs from US public, giving such a fine detail of all the force majeures which may happen, because India and US are known for their past of what has happened on nuclear. So many conditions it has given, very well defined, to raise that money, that I think if anything really goes wrong, they would have defined it. So it is also contributing to a good wash up in terms of how this thing is handled in the future.
Thank you for this. You make an interesting point, Mr. Kaul. What you are saying here, on one hand, is don't just stack up the force majeure clause. Be specific, think about it. But you haven't stopped there. What you are saying is force majeure is actually intended to provide you for answers in a specific situation. So let the clause do its job. So just saying that, all right, you have force majeure, you can't perform, suspended, terminated, is not really helping. And particularly if you just stack it up, it certainly is not helping. It's just creating a problem. So I think what you are really asking here is for us to think about how we can redesign it. You identify, you specify as to what force majeure would be, and also see, okay, yes, of course, suspension would be your first resort. That is what would first happen. But then thereafter, you would want to say, how would you want to possibly, that might provide you some window or elbow room to actually renegotiate depending on what the situation is, and not quickly just jump to termination, because that is not serving the intent of the contract. Like you said, it is intended for a specific purpose, and let's find ways to solve for them. Think about specific projects as opposed to relying upon generic clauses which may or may not help. So great. I think that that's a very simple and relevant way to look at a force majeure, that we must see how force majeure is actually addressing the issue. Thank you for that. I think we still do have time for another question here, and because I wouldn't want to miss this question, because energy contracts are they sit in a regulated regime, And it's just not one regime, there are multiple. So, for instance, in a solar contract, what happens to land acquisition rules somewhere in Gujarat or Rajasthan has an impact to what is contained my obligations under the PPA. My commissioning date gets shifted. It doesn't happen because everything is integrated, and one change in some state actually is affecting my PPA, and therein lies an issue. So it is not just about one law, one regulatory landscape. There are multiple, and it's just not a matter of contracts or negotiation what parties agree, because they are all interconnected. So it would be right to say, I think, that there are layers, whether it is tariff, whether it is PNGRB, and each of them will have its own impact. So the idea is, how are these things, how are these various elements tested during a crisis, conflicts, or a simple geopolitical situation?
Yeah, again, I would say, compliment you. Very good question. That essentially what you're saying is that there's so many regulations, standards specific to energy. There is a separate safety board. There is a separate regulator. There are guidelines. There are again government controls. Even pricing, tariff. Formal controls, not so formal controls through ownership. But I would say that that's a reality which we have to accept, that energy comes with conditions. It comes with severe conditions because very long term and very high capital investment is required to maintain that. It's easier to say, I want a car, I want a metro, I want my jacket, because the dyes, etc., it's all crude oil. I mean, the computer I'm looking at, the internet, which is all, it's energy. I mean, we can't stay. I mean, the shampoo I used in the morning may have come 3 kilometers down in Iraq, or the bottle may have come from there. I mean, we don't realize the value chain we are getting exposed to. So it will come with a price and some conditions. And sometime light-hearted way, I always say that thank God we are a buyer or an importer of energy. And we have some coal for which we are making our own electricity. But there are energy regimes which has a king or a sultan. So there the control is absolute. So yes, there are subset of a lot of regulations which are there in energy. Like I overemphasized in the beginning, do understand those energy systems, energy regulations, energy markets before we touch the scope of any agreement in this area. Understand the cascading effect of that. Understand the obligations of the other party which you are getting, that how critically they depend on what your part of role is in that agreement. So it's important. I would say that I will move away from this. Okay, all this is available on internet. There are regulators. Everything is specified, from calorific value to what it takes to put a pipeline, what it takes to put solar, what is the this state's solar policy. Even there are over 12 to 15 states in the country which have come out with their hydrogen policies also. So there are EV policy, PLI policies. Everything is there on the internet if somebody wants to see and can research before getting into any of these agreements. My emphasis is that do not think that they will not matter. They will matter. You might be very small part of doing the energy agreement, but the entire HSC policy or the safety policy will suddenly come on you, even if you are a very, very minor player or even a major player, then it will come whatever, the entire liabilities. So it is important to understand. My focus is only on quick resolution. Today there are already time-tested quick resolutions available. Make sure that wherever you can insert them, please do so. Whether it is tiered escalation or expert determination, DAB, dispute adjudication boards, etc. For every level of contract, there are 4 or 5 very quick. And I am requesting these days repeatedly to energy negotiators, do not think now you have time for resolution, that it will get resolved in a year or 2 years or 3 years, or it will get resolved in courts. Make sure that the golden rule of 28 days of raising a resolution and making sure that it gets into a resolution cycle is there, and there are mechanisms, whether through AI or softwares today available to do that. So our compliances or annual reporting or all that has become so tough that carrying over stuff is no longer either preferred or possible uh, in this. So the idea is that in all of what you are saying, yes, there are a lot of accompanying layers of standards, policy measures, incentives, even sanctions have a role. You can't just export to or buy things from anywhere. Know them, manage them, but whatever you ultimately sign up, make sure that the number of quick resolutions of issues which can happen, all those mechanisms are inside the contract.
Thank you so much for this. And I think we do have time left for a quick roundup of the session. I think before we do a roundup, I did see a question there from Mr. Singh regarding EPC and O&M contracts. We'll come to that in the roundup, which I think Mr. Kaul has already answered, where he said that we must see where your contract sits in the entire ecosystem. So an EPC and O&M will also sit in the context of the project that you are doing, upstream and downstream. So we need to see those two ends. And yeah, this is, I get it, it's too broad an answer, but that's what it is. Coming back to summing up, I think you make a very interesting and useful point, Mr. Kaul, where you mentioned that don't take your eye off the intent of the contract. Keep that in focus. Keep the entire ecosystem in mind. And when you talk about energy, we need to know that it's a very dynamic system. It's very dynamic. So unless we are alive to the fact that it's dynamic, we will probably not be able to anticipate what we need to protect ourselves against. And of course, to expect the unexpected, we need to be clear. Let's not hide behind generic clauses. Let's understand where we stand and where our contract sits in the entire value chain. As you rightly said, even your shampoo bottle is affected with the hormones. Literally. So yes, that's quite true. So I think if I have to sum up in 3 words, and I leave it to you after that, Mr. Kaul, intent, see the context, and cater for it, and know that this field, this sector is dynamic, interdependent, and there are various variables that have a role to play in it, and the crisis is one of them. So I will leave it to you to share with us your parting words.
Vinayak, any questions you want to take, or we've run out of time?
Yes, please. I would like to thank all the participants who have put some thought-provoking questions in the chat box during the webinar. If time permits, I would just like to share 2 pertinent questions that we have received. Suniti ma'am already addressed the question about EPC and O&M contractors and their preparedness. Other than that, we have received a question which I found very interesting. The question asks, in India, this is by Amrita ma'am, in India, some energy supply and construction projects have long gestation periods for both negotiation and execution. What are the top 2 changes that you see happening?
Well, I must thank the participant. It's really the most fundamental change which will happen is that the pace would become unforgiving. Because world is already sort of a little rattled about the changing dynamics of energy competition, a very high, uh, what I should say, highly tense geopolitics, where fortunes could shift here and there. The pace has been, and the rule-based order or the because energy, the commodity from day one is international. I mean, it's always it doesn't need there is very little concept of domestic and local and international in energy. It's uh, everything gets adjusted as per the international state of things, because either on one extreme end it's technology, the other end it is commodity, and both are internationally tradable. So pace is going to become first unforgiving. Nobody wants to go back to shareholders and say that now there is this escalation in project cost, there is this problem, this contractor did not work out, this thing, this technology did not work out, this. So uh, if you have any agreements which you are agreeing to or are signing in the future, make sure that your pace is monitored, you are into it, and there are enough redressal mechanism if that pace is affected. No longer you can say, I was right, I was there, so it didn't happen. I mean, uh, there is no winners when both are losers. So that's the one change I see. Second big change I see in these long projects is use of AI. I mean, today we have Autodesk, Primavera, Procore, we have Microsoft, Atlassian, so many softwares. But today they will get, for the future, long gestation period projects, they will get evaluated about about how well they use AI in terms of documenting, flashing, escalating, decision support systems, how much they compel the decision support system to debottleneck what they are monitoring. So that's the second biggest. The technology, the monitoring would overtake what humans can do in that, because that is required in a long gestation period project, 24/7, 365 days. So there is no off, there is nothing that today you're feeling energetic, so you notice everything, and tomorrow. The third element is the quality assurance will change dynamically. So inspections, auditions, rejections, all that are going to become far sharper. So make sure their agreements provide well-defined these situations. And of course, I would say that many zeros are going to get added in these projects. So ability to collaborate, ability to form consortiums, ability to work through those consortiums, ability to work within the diversified team who understand the contract in its right spirit is a human angle. Ability to remain connected in a way through technological platforms where delivery is live and positive. That is another. The best thing is that the contracts serve as a facilitator, as a delivery partner, rather than as a dispute, something you refer to in a dispute.
Thank you so much for answering that question. And I would like to say to all of the participants who had posted very pertinent and thought provoking questions that the questions that we didn't have time to answer now can be found in our post event updates. You can find them on our social media, on IESD's websites. Alternatively, you can also mail us at bd@iesd.in, and the recording for the whole webinar will also be available after a few days. So with that, I would like to formally thank Suniti ji and Mr. Kaul for your valuable perspectives and insights. I think that the energy transition movement overall is very fortunate to have thought leaders like you, combining decades of practical experience with your future forward thinking and the way you balance all different types of perspectives. And IESD in particular, we are grateful to have mentors and subject matter experts and distinguished professionals and academics who guide and direct our webinars, our programs. So, sincere thanks to our speakers for today for enlightening us and sharing your perspectives. I would also like to sincerely thank the IESD team for their efforts to organize and facilitate the smooth running of this event. And finally, and most importantly, my sincere thanks to all those in attendance today who decided to give your valuable time for this knowledge sharing session. It is because of your interest and participation that such valuable discourse has been possible. So, thank you everyone for attending. And the session recording will be available in a few days. Any closing remarks? I know that I've thanked everyone from the speakers, otherwise, we'll close the session.
Thanks, ISD team, for all your effort for this webinar.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
all.
everyone. Thank you, everyone. Close the session for today. Thank you.